The WWE Draft as a concept has existed now for about 22 years.
Triple H! Oh my God!
Barring a few years in the 2010s, the occasional superstar shakeup, it's been a staple of the annual television calendar for WWE, and it's something that some fans look forward to. It feels like the start of a new season for the rosters of Raw and SmackDown, getting a refresh of their talent. It's been the stage where new storylines begin, new feuds are started, some are even reignited, and it became essential for many, many years for keeping WWE's programming not stagnant and keeping it not the same old stuff. But the last few years, it feels like the WWE Draft has decreased in relevance from what it once was, and to some it's become downright just not meaningful. Meaningless, maybe? Yeah, near that point. It's even possible that WWE is realizing this, especially with the introduction of the transfer window concept in late 2024. Is WWE as a whole moving away from the draft? Is it time to finally put an end to the concept and introduce a new and innovative way to trade between brands? Join us as we dive into the WWE Draft and maybe how it became less of what it was meant to be. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin Callum. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you are drafting a WWE brand, we'll give you 5 wrestlers. Who do you draft? Let us know in the comments below. The concept of the WWE Draft was taken from the NBA and the NFL, a movement to emulate the sports in sports entertainment, especially as WWE tried to replicate the Monday Night Wars in the early 2000s with a war, if you will, between Raw and SmackDown. It was a fairly smart ratings grab by WWE because fans feel consequential to what is going on with the show at the time, disrupting or rerouting the path of their favorite characters. It was the most exciting in its early first few years. Yeah, and when they brought it back in 2016 after years of not having a brand split. The idea on paper is the right one, but the execution, the last few years with the WWE Draft really wasn't there. At least that seems to be the consensus. It was good for what it was in the 2000s and 2016, but after that, things began to change. The first attempt at this was Vince McMahon and WWE's higher brass introducing the Superstar Shakeup. Basically, the brands would be loosely shooken up around WrestleMania season, and that was kind of understood for the most part. You would see Raw and SmackDown talent on major shows like Elimination Chamber, big quarterly pay-per-views, the Royal Rumble, and obviously WrestleMania. On paper, the idea wasn't too bad because it moved away from the draft, but it just felt like a downgrade in the way it was done. There was no real direction or formality with the brand trades, and in 2017, when it began, there was really just a negative reception to the entire thing. The SmackDown roster felt like it was being sort of gutted to prop up what was going on in Raw. In reality, it felt like one of those weird, irrational quirks around that time with WWE's creative vision, specifically with long-form talent maneuvering, playing into extended stories and not really having the feeling of cementing expectations building to something. Yeah, nothing really changed that much, and in 2018, they started to drift away from the brand split again by having the wild card rule. And it was just another rephrasing of breaking the red and blue lines between Mondays and Fridays. Why even have a brand split at that point? Well, it all changed when a 5-year, $1 billion deal was scored by WWE for SmackDown to move to the Fox TV network. Yeah, then in 2019 in the United States, this ensured exclusive rosters were going to be needed, and the wild card rule vanished into thin air, which was sort of a relief. The problem with the wildcard rule was that it ruined the sanctity of brand exclusivity, and the quality of the program began to regress. So that year, the WWE Draft felt like it was a good idea to be brought back, like a clear-cut, straightforward way to deal with things, especially with WWE now conferencing its rosters, with Fox having SmackDown on network TV, Raw staying on NBC Universal's USA Network with cable TV. 5 years on, the WWE Draft seems to just not be something to get excited about anymore, at least for a majority of casual wrestling fans. To borrow a phrase from the late great Owen Hart, enough is enough, and it is time for a change. There really isn't a need to have this big flashy stage show with drum rolls and graphics for fans to see superstars or changing brands. It feels like a ratings grab, which is okay. That's the idea. Everything on WWE television should be a thing to grab viewers. But now it feels like WWE's in a strong enough position overall, with thrilling rivalries and must-see matches where they don't need to do a basic grab for attention like this. Another critical issue with this whole thing at the draft often is that superstars are just kind of staying on the same brand, so that's sort of anticlimactic. Feels like you're having a garage sale, you're displaying items that aren't for sale. Counterproductive, right? Do you really need the entire show to tell us that Seth Rollins is getting drafted to Raw, Randy Orton's gonna stay on SmackDown? Who is really interested in a drum roll moment to see superstars who aren't going anywhere that they haven't already been? It's more exciting to see NXT call-ups because these are actually fresh faces to the larger global WWE audience that maybe some fans don't know about or simply just heard about. Not to mention that you are seeing them cheering each other on, which again gives a sense of it being real or more real, something fans crave a lot considering they're watching a scripted show with people playing a sport. Still, the NXT aspect of the draft is the only thing that feels interesting at the basic level at this point. WWE could do a thing where the WWE Draft episodes include only superstars changing brands. And that's one major issue with that. For one, they can't drag out 2 episodes of a Raw and a SmackDown like they normally would. It would limit the appeal of the draft special and probably make it a little bit more cut and dry. The solution to that would be to fill the show with more matches, more backstage reactions to superstars getting drafted, but even then, our argument is that the WWE needs to move away from the draft concept altogether. It's just that WWE is far more of an entertainment-oriented show than they are sports-oriented, so the draft feels like it's just out of place nowadays. Even if it's meant to be a post-WrestleMania hangover refresh, it's reached the point where it's kind of an over-the-top waste of time. But since we like the idea of a solution-oriented thinking thing, here are a few ideas to ensure superstars change brands without having one particular draft concept for it. One is the quarterly trade window, similar to the transfer window concept. The idea is where it's a very limited time period where superstars can move from brand to brand and negotiate with the opposite brand's general manager over a possible exclusive contract. It would allow an exclusive certain number of superstars to either be recruited by a GM themselves or request the transfer to another brand. Almost a storyline concept to create conflict. Yeah, that's more important to a scripted show. That would make the transition more subtle and less of a flashy one, but it could seamlessly help transition Raw superstars going to SmackDown, SmackDown stars going to Raw. And since WWE gets to actually choose who goes where, they can calculate beforehand who they need for which brand and how many superstars are changing brands. It wouldn't be a massive shakeup. It would save us more time from watching a GM announce that someone is just gonna stay here who was here last week. There would be fewer names moving around each time, but the quarterly trade approach means WWE can emphasize brand changes that actually matter and make the show different than just make the show the same. The second option, which is admittedly much more of a odd out there one, is to have a fixed loser leaves a brand match for both Raw and SmackDown. It would have some consequence. It would make things change. It could close up some storylines and create new ones. There are limitations with this because having 2 matches like this a year might be considered excessive. But still, it can actually help draw viewers if the story would be told well enough. That's right, these matches would have stakes for the winner and the loser. There could be a fixed slot of a loser leaves Raw and a loser leaves SmackDown match in different parts of the year. The difficulty would be determining exactly how you decide which superstars are in the match, whether it's for the men or the women. If you create 2 matches of each brand for the men and the women's divisions, then you're going to have 4 loser leaves the brand matches, which could be excessive, or maybe that works in terms of utilizing all the talent and creating all of these new breakout points. It can be done at a random point to elevate specific storylines and keep them hot and relevant, and of course create new ones. The third idea is to feature more of a backstage presentation of the general managers of both brands going neck to neck in negotiating trades in a sit-down kayfabe format. Almost the entire studio production element could be streamed on WWE's vast digital video platforms as sort of a pop-up special operating away from Raw and SmackDown, allowing those shows to have more interesting ring time and promos, and allowing hardcore fans who want to know who got drafted to watch the show online. Treat it like its own special separate thing that complements the main roster shows of Raw and SmackDown. You can have guys like Triple H and Bruce Pritchard in the same room to amp up the importance of the interaction. It's a good way to see the GMs and their egos clashing. It would make for good kind of side complimentary television. WWE does a half-decent job in 2024 emphasizing the power of the GMs to protect their rosters and establish rules like certain champions not being able to change brands. But they can add new layers to this with the actual presentation of the GMs establishing how they're maneuvering talent in a critical space. It could also lead to rules being established and who's involved in a mandatory exchange of champions if it's happening at all. The WWE Draft is also presented as a needle driver for the most dedicated consumers, so having it be separate would allow the obligations of Raw and SmackDown to stand, with this separate show being a presentation that is still meaningful. All 3 of these can be integrated into television to ensure brand switches are happening throughout the year. It's a great way to keep fans on their toes while adapting to the future of streaming and social media consumption, which is 24/7, which means adapting is going to be the most important thing. WWE has to be 10 steps ahead of their audience on this, and maybe they already are. Maybe we'll see a draft implemented with Raw moving in a gigantic way over to Netflix, and of course SmackDown staying with USA Network and WWE's longtime partner in NBC Universal. It needs to be fresh and purposeful in how it's utilized. It's a thing of the past to present the draft the same old way, and it should be kept as something in the past and move into the new era that WWE truly is in. The new way of approaching brand trades needs to be exciting and less traditional. The move of Raw to Netflix is going to change wrestling forever, and it's probably a good idea to accept different concepts to stay relevant. WWE as a company always wants to maintain that relevancy, to stay young, to resonate with demographics across the board, whether it's kids whose parents can't buy them the merchandise, or the kids who don't have an attention span longer than a TikTok, or the adults who are saying, "This is how the show should be booked." They have to maintain those spinning plates and keep it going all of the time. As we mentioned, it isn't the idea of superstars switching brands that needs to change, it's the concept of how they're presented. Let us know what you think, and as we said before, you got 5 wrestlers you can pick from the WWE roster. You're the GM of a brand. Who are those 5 roster picks you're making? Let us know in the comments below.